welcoming you on this kind of a little bit grey and cold morning, unusually for Melbourne, in the middle of January. I'd like to welcome Maja Ferenc. You can see her on the other screen. She is quite new to Polaron, but not that new. Maja, how long have you been working with us?
I started around late October, so it's I've hit I think nearly the 3-month mark.
3 months, okay. And tell us, what do you do?
So I'm on the grant team, and I help Polish or people with Polish roots who are not eligible to get a confirmation of their Polish citizenship. I help them attain that by presidential grants. So that's a special clause where the president of Poland can, on a case-by-case basis, can grant someone Polish citizenship. There are a few rules why some people are not eligible. That has got to do with immigration, maybe who you married, etc. Yeah.
Okay. And you have your own client load, and essentially you work with them on improving their knowledge and links to Poland and all kinds of things.
Correct.
Like that. But today we are here to talk about something else altogether, and that is a Polish passport. So every time these rankings come out, people get very excited because what happens is that passports of different countries are listed as strong or stronger or whatever it is. And this particular ranking came out, I think, last week, and it listed Poland really, really highly up there with, I think, Japan and a few other countries that traditionally have passports that will get you anywhere. So this is quite a surprise, I guess, and a good progress. But in terms of your own background, you were born in Australia, but you are Polish, is that right? Can you tell us a bit more?
Yeah, sure. So as Eva correctly said, I was born in Melbourne and I grew up here. I later moved to Switzerland because my father, being in IT, he received a job at AXA Insurance in Switzerland. So I moved abroad. And I also lived in Poland, and having the Polish passport, then my mother made sure that I did have access, for example, to the Polish school system. I did go to a Polish school during my teenage years. I've been sort of all around the globe back here now, but having the Polish passport definitely facilitated me living in Poland, and my parents wanted to move there. Didn't work out because of the business, but that's a bit about me. I was abroad now 17 years old. Came back 3 months ago.
So that was going to be my next question, because you've traveled everywhere. What is your favorite place in the world? And I'm assuming it's Poland, but maybe not.
I must say you're right on that one, Poland. So during my 17 years abroad, especially the last 11, because I was living in Switzerland alone after my studies, also just living there and enjoying Europe, I always traveled to Poland. During like each holiday, every summer and winter. So when I had some days off, it was always Poland.
Okay. And having a Polish passport, and it's interesting to me because Poland entered the European Union in 2004, so 16 years ago. Some people still don't know what it entitles you to. So can you maybe explain to us what does having a Polish passport mean in the context of the European Union, I guess, or the ability to travel in there?
Yeah, sure. So it is one of the strongest passports out there, and obviously having it, if you have Polish roots, it allows you to connect with your Polish roots again, and you can have access. You have access to 130 countries without a visa. And now, in my personal example, Switzerland being tax haven. Well, we have there's a so-called Schengen agreement between the EU countries and Switzerland. Right. And I personally was really connected to the Polish diaspora in Switzerland. And it's also easy to get a job there with the Polish passport. So basically you can live, work, travel, study, retire, buy property, and it's a prospering country, Poland, and a lot of investment properties that know many people who invest there or have invested. And you can operate a business in any of the 28 EU countries. There's also free university education in many European countries. You've got subsidized this, I'm just saying what's coming to mind: subsidized rates at universities, also access to scholarships that are actually only reserved for EU citizens, and so you've got all these benefits that come along with having the Polish passport.
You touched on a couple of very interesting points there, Maja, because Switzerland isn't a member of the EU, and neither is Norway and a few other places, I think, other countries in Europe. But they do have agreements in place that are reciprocal. In other words, you can, you can have access to all kinds of things, even if you're not a European Union member. But those countries that are having a Polish passport, what does it give them? Could you maybe explain to us briefly what happens if you hold a Polish passport and you want to live in Sweden or Germany?
Or in Switzerland? Did you mean
No, just European
Sweden.
Union. Yeah.
Just EU. Yeah, sure. Putting Switzerland aside, because that's thanks to the Schengen agreement. If you want to live in Germany or Sweden, I mean, these countries are part of the EU. So even crossing the border, there aren't any like controls. You just cross the border, and you have rights to live there then and look for work. So there are many people who are between countries and earning, for example, in Germany or Sweden. And there are people on my mum's side, Polish family, who actually work in Sweden because they're from Gdańsk. So they're often there for some contracting work, 3 months. They come back, and the exchange rate, I guess, when it comes to the two different currencies of the corresponding countries, it is of huge benefit because it's very strongly euro. And Poland being zloty, you can definitely make some money to then later invest in Poland.
Right. Because the cost of living in Poland, of course, is lower. I was going to ask you to comment on this because we live in such a strange world. You know, like if you think about your parents' journey who immigrated to Australia, then went back. Then you stayed there for quite some time. Then you came to Australia. But a lot of your clients are actually American, I think, and their ancestry goes back even further than yours. And essentially, their ancestors left because of poverty, potentially, persecution, all kinds of things like that. But now Poland is so attractive to people. I was reading, and I think we actually posted a video on our Facebook page yesterday about the economic target that Poland is. So why would you say that someone that has got Polish heritage or Polish ancestry, why should they pursue a Polish passport? What would be some of the things you'd be suggesting that they can do with their passports once they get it?
I mean, definitely, if one takes into consideration you touching on my parents, for example, people who emigrated, and Poland, yes, it was under communism, but it has had such a rapid growth since 1990s, and has one of the best stock exchange markets for investment in Europe, and it's growing at rates that are unbelievable. Also during COVID, for example, unemployment, it wasn't affected by COVID as other EU countries were. And you've got just access to national healthcare benefits, and you can set up and grow your own business. It's a great environment for children too, if you have a family. And Poland is such a big country. Nature is beautiful, and schools are great. I went to a school there when I was a teenager, so I can confirm that. There's an large array of reasons why I would say go for it and reclaim your citizenship, connect with the Polish roots. Because I dream of Poland nonstop all the time. But I was considering actually living there and buying property. But I guess the only close family I have is my mum and sister here in Melbourne. So ended up being Melbourne. Right.
And we're so lucky to have you, of course. So a couple of points that you touched on that are very interesting. One is that Poland is really quite a diverse place, and I'm talking about geography here because you've got the sea, you've got the mountains, you've got the lakes, you've got all kinds of things you can see, just to go sightseeing. But other than that, I think it makes it into media sometimes all the wrong reasons, and people don't see what you've just talked about, and that's the strong economy, you know, the intelligence and hard work of the people, the resilience. How would you describe to Poland if you had to sell it to someone? What would you say about the country that you're very, very close connected to, but also you facilitate that connection with and to your clients?
I mean, I can only speak of my personal experiences, but I can just only underline what is portrayed in the media. In my right mind, it does not at all correspond to what I see there. When I'm there, I don't see any of that. There are so many festivals, and their nightlife. It's great. People are so
good food.
Good food.
Amazing, yes.
Exactly. I always enjoy the food there, especially because it's a bit cheaper, so I enjoy myself. But when it comes to Poland and like Gdańsk, so I was always traveling to Gdańsk. My father's from Krakow, went there too, but I can only say that it's so international, and it seems like London in a way, maybe sometimes, because you've got so many different nationalities and expats, lots of expats there for work. So
very cosmopolitan, yeah.
Yeah, very cosmopolitan, and Gdańsk and Warsaw, Krakow being business hubs, I guess for career development, for life, and you've got a high quality of lifestyle, I find. So I can only say and underline that it's great if you're willing to get a Polish passport and live in Poland. And I wouldn't pay attention to what's on the media. It's really just propaganda. I've enjoyed myself traveling to Poland time and time again. And I said it was my plan to live there, but things turned out otherwise.
And I think, you know, it's fair to say that the politics are pretty polarized, but where aren't politics polarized? You know, everywhere you look, there's confusion and controversy. All right, so now we call this session, what did we call it? 10 things you can do with your Polish passport. So yes, go for it. What can you do?
So you don't have a need for visas. So as I had said, you can travel to 130 countries with, you don't need a visa for that. And most US, Australian, I think, Canadian, New Zealand citizens, they can enter the EU without a visa, I think.
Up to 90 days, yeah.
Yeah.
But you can't work or study or, it's just tourism, yeah.
So you wouldn't have these benefits that you just mentioned, Eva, if you wouldn't have, without the Polish passport. And you basically have no restrictions, and you can stay there with no restrictions. And for working residential rights, so citizens of the EU, they and like countries of the Schengen Agreement, being Switzerland, they're legally entitled to stay. You can work there. And also when it comes to buying properties, for example, setting up businesses and education, universities, you've got the same access to scholarships, as I said, that only EU citizens would have. And you have the right to consular protection.
Yeah.
And I mentioned access to universal healthcare, national healthcare system, and you can hold the public, I think, politically, if you want to be politically active, you can hold public service positions. And obviously you also have the right to vote, and definitely connect with your roots and family history. You know, if you're there, you can take your time, and it'll be a journey for you, discovering the towns they're from, and just enjoying the beauty of Polish towns, small villages, architecture. I mean, I'm always in awe when I went to visit the places my mum's ancestors are from, or my dad's.
So you've listed a whole heap of them, but I wanted to hone in on a couple, Maja. The first one is the voting. Do you vote? Is that okay if I asked you that? Do you vote in the Polish election?
Yeah, sure. You can ask me that. No, so I haven't voted, but being honest, not that politically active. But who knows, if I would settle down there and, you know, be living there, I think I would, since it also would impact me, I'd vote.
It's an interesting thing, isn't it? Because I also obviously have a Polish passport, and I also don't vote. And I do that for a reason, and that is that I don't really, to be honest, I don't really understand Polish politics because I don't live there. You know, I visit a few times a year, but I just don't think I have a good understanding of the politics to be able to cast a vote. On the other hand, the overseas votes, particularly in the last presidential elections, have been very influential, and there's so much interest. I can't remember off the top of my head what the stats were, but like people voting outside of Poland, the numbers, they went through the roof. And one of the things that people might not know is that the overseas votes, and you know, like in a country like America, that's like 500,000 people. So you can imagine that it's quite influential, as I said. They go towards Warsaw. So all the votes are put into kind of one bucket. So you can imagine that therefore those votes, even though if there are a few from a place like New Zealand or Australia, they will count for, you know, sometimes they can shift political ground. So for that reason, I don't vote. But it is one of the rights that you get as a citizen. And do you know where you can vote as far as what types of elections?
To be honest with you, I am not that well acquainted.
Well, let me tell you. Let me tell you where. So you can vote, of course, in any of the parliamentary elections, but also in the European, elections as well. So they haven't been as popular. I think the attendance rates aren't as high for the European, elections. But nevertheless, in the last few years, I think people's civic participation in Poland has increased, and people do want to have a voice. So as a citizen, you can vote in both, actually. You have the right. And there's a bit of a process if you live outside of Poland, because you do have to go through the consulate. You have to be a registered voter. And then, last year in August, when there were presidential elections, I think they did postal votes, which were in themselves controversial, and that's the case all over the world. But normally what happens is that in a country like Australia, people have to, so the voting support personnel, I guess, they have to stay up till like 4 o'clock in the morning until the votes in Poland close before they can start counting. And I think there's always a lot of interest for people that do hold dual citizenship, and some people are very keen and very interested in shaping Poland's politics, and they have the right to do so, of course. So I just thought I'll touch on it. The other thing you mentioned is Polish economy and also Polish property market. What can you tell us about that?
Well, in terms of price, that always being like a main thing to consider. What's your budget? Very, very cheap for, let's say, US nationals or anyone from abroad where the currency is strong, be it Australia, be it Switzerland. I can just give you an example. Apartments or medium price of a house is around 450 to 650, and then it's a nice house, 650,000 zloty.
Okay.
That's maybe
so
around.
What's that in American dollars or Australian dollars?
I would, well, in Swiss francs, that will be around, it stands 1 to 4, so around 200,000, maybe between $200,000, $250,000. But I'm talking about a really nice house. And,
right.
Yeah.
And also, of course, there's a very, anyone that's been to Poland, they notice that most people live in apartments rather than houses. And that's even more reasonable, except for big cities like Warsaw, Gdańsk, or Krakow, of course, where the prices are really high because that's where people want to live, right? And so what would you say would be like a median price for an apartment in Poland?
I mean, I know that on my mom's side, they just sold one and they live in Rumia. Rumia is, that's close to Gdańsk. So right. It's called Trójmiasto, that entails 3 cities, Gdańsk, Sopot, Gdynia. Rumia is around 15 minutes away from Gdynia, not far. And they sold an apartment. It was nicely renovated inside. It was in one of those typical communist blocks sort of that you have, but very nice inside. It has its own charm. And they sold it for around, I think, 169,000 zloty. Okay. And that's around 2.5 or 3 rooms, and on the last floor. And I think that's around $80,000, maybe $80,000, $70,000. So it's still a great investment. You can rent it out anytime, and that is really surprisingly cheap.
Right, really reasonable. And I think if you do go to Poland, if you haven't been, I think a lot of people would be surprising, but the number of developments that are happening and just really the most stunning apartment blocks. So I think a lot of people have still this image of Poland of 1970s, 70s and 80s, the horrible blocks that you're talking about. But, you know, I remember because my family got one in 1979, like we moved and we were waiting, I don't know for how many years, 7 maybe, to get an, and it was tiny. I think, I want to say it was like 28 square meters or something. So tiny. But I remember as a kid standing there thinking, wow, this is so amazing, because, and now it isn't, but and those blocks were actually built, they were not disposable, but they had like an expiry date of about 25 years. Like when they were building them, they knew that they were not of such good quality, but now they do form the, you know, part of the landscape. But alongside those, that they are being replaced by this really beautifully architecturally designed apartments and you know, really high quality buildings. Have you seen much of that when you followed that?
Definitely. So I guess I wanted to add that one shouldn't think that it's mostly those old communist buildings. Yes, they do exist, but there are so many new developments and so many beautiful properties being built. And that's why, as I had touched on that, when it comes to investments, so many people, even foreigners, are investing. Obviously, you're restricted then when it comes to other things. You wouldn't be restricted as a Polish passport holder then, once you attain it. But yes, it's becoming modernized, so modern, especially cities, but also smaller villages and towns.
Yeah. And the other interesting for me thing about infrastructure in Poland is that because it was so far behind, it didn't have to be replaced. So, for example, phones, I think there was one phone per 10,000 people or something like that. So when mobile telephony came in or you know, any of the internet connections, they didn't have to replace it. They just put in brand new infrastructure, and therefore you know, it's much faster and much better than in many other countries in the world. So let's run through our list of 10. Maja, let's summarize it. Believe it or not, we're 25 minutes into our session. That's gone really quickly.
Time flies,
we have quite a few questions there. So I just wanted to ask you to just give us the 10 things that you can do, amazing things, cool things that you can do with your passport.
Well, no need for visas. As I said, full working and residential rights. You can start and grow your own business. That's and access to universal healthcare. You've got 5 such benefits. And then, right to vote and hold public service positions. Connect to your heritage and family history in peace, because you can live there and you're not restricted. And
that's 9.
I guess property ownership. And
number 10.
Yeah.
That's a really cool list. So thank you, Maja. We're going to hand over to Andrea now for some questions, because your session's been very popular, let me tell you. Hello to Nicholas, Agnieszka, and everybody else that's watching. Over to you, Andrea, please.
Thank you, ladies. First question I have here: do I have to pay taxes in Poland once I confirm my Polish citizenship?
I might grab that one, Maja. So depending on the country that you come from, for example, Australia has got a bilateral treaty with Poland where there's no double taxation. So you can actually choose where to pay tax. Normally, unless you live in Poland, you're not required to pay tax. But let's say you have property or you know, some sort of employment connection, then you would be required to pay tax. But in the case of Australians, you can choose. In the case of Americans, it's a lot more complicated, because as an American citizen, you always have to report on tax, but you might be able to choose where you pay tax, but you wouldn't normally be double taxed. It is important to inform yourself of your rights and responsibilities. But normally, unless you live there, then you're not required to pay in both countries of you know, your birth and Polish citizenship.
Thank you, Eva. Will my American professional qualifications be recognized once I get my Polish passport? I guess this person wants to know, like, if they want to move to Poland, Will they be recognized, the qualification?
Look, I'll hand over to Maja to answer that question, but I'll just say it does depend on your profession, really. There's a process of recognition of your qualifications, just like it is in any country. But let's say you are a doctor or a lawyer, you know, the systems are significantly different. So you might have to retrain. I mean, you know, if it's something else like a graphic designer or whatever, then I would say yes. But there's a formal process of qualification recognitions in Poland. Maja, do you know anything about it at all?
I was going to sort of go in the same direction as you just went, but I know that there are, for example, let's say you're a nurse. It really depends on what type of course you did back in your country. And it can be that some modules, parts of that course will be accredited, but there are like worker unions and, you know, foundations or companies, places you can contact, and they would be able to sort of give you advice on that.
Yeah.
You would have to gain extra knowledge or do some extra courses or not, but it really does depend on the profession. Yeah,
it does. So we have one client. So I have a little bit of sort of first-hand knowledge. We have a client who's a psychologist, and he is based in the UK, but prior to UK Brexiting, he joined a European Psychologists Association, something like that. I can't remember the details. If anyone really wants to know, I can find out more. But that gives him the right to practice in Poland as well. So there are, depending on the profession, there are associations that, you know, if you join as a member, they do all the checks and balances, of course, and then you are able to practice if you're a member of a particular association. It just really depends. But if anyone wants more information, we can potentially put you in touch with people that know better than what we do. But there are systems in place to accommodate that. All right.
Thank you. There's one more question for Maja. Which cities in Poland would you recommend visiting for a 2 weeks holiday, a family holiday?
Sure. So I got to say Gdańsk first. Well, all 3 cities of Gdańsk, Sopot, Gdynia, because my mom's side of the family is there, so I always travel there for years on end. Definitely Warsaw, more modern like architecture. Yeah, it's changing a lot. So you will find, and Kraków, no doubt Kraków, with Wawel, the castle there, and the old town square, just the old architecture. It's beautiful, and you could walk through the Krakowian streets, or I could for hours just admiring it. So definitely those 3. I guess Wrocław, been once to Wrocław, that's close to the German-Polish border. So that's also a city I'd recommend visiting. Also sort of like old architecture. Yeah, the old town is nice.
Yeah, there's quite a few good picks there, Maja. And of course, we do recommend that you go back to your ancestral town. And sometimes for people, that's very difficult because that town may no longer be in Poland, but you can pick another town and you know, we'll adopt you if your town is no longer in Poland. Maja, thank you so much for today's session. That was really super interesting, and you're such a great advocate for your work and for being Polish. So thank you for putting a you know, I don't want to say a positive spin because there's nothing to spin, but I think it's really important to showcase some of the good sides of Poland and some of the wonderful things that Poland and Polish people achieve. And it is a very resilient nation that has gone through a lot. One of the things that you'd be covering in your sessions is Polish history with people. And if you look at and you know, if anyone's really interested, the couple of videos and articles we posted recently on this Facebook page explains Polish economy in the context of its history and why it's achieving so much, even though other countries may not be. So look it up. Join us next week for another session. And Maja, thank you so much. I know you have a busy day, so do I. Yeah. So I'll leave you to it, but it's been amazing. Thank you so very much. And thank you, Andrea, for facilitating.
Thank you too, Andrea.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.